alive! It's alive! It's alive! It's alive!
Hello and welcome to Alive After Reading. I'm Tim Niederreiter, and with me today is a returning guest who most of you will be familiar with, I think, at this point, if you've listened to the podcast for a while. Bruce Solheim. He's the author of the Timeless Trilogy and the comic book Snark, featuring more or less half-human, half-alien protagonist. Welcome to the show, Bruce.
Hey, thanks for having me back, Tim.
It's great to have you back. And actually, you were saying something really interesting about your approach to the Timeless Trilogy before we managed to get recording, so we jumped right in here.
Yeah. Well, yeah, each of the Timeless books, I've had a prologue and an epilogue, and my editor mentioned it to me. He said, should we really change that to introduction and conclusion? Because this is a nonfiction book about your paranormal and alien contact experiences. And that's usually a convention used in fiction writing, the prologue and epilogue. And I said, well, not exclusively. If you look it up, it can be used for nonfiction. And in my case, it's such a big story that I think it's very appropriate. And just my writing style, I think it's very appropriate because I like to, even though it's sequential, kind of these things, it's chronological. All these things have happened to me in each book. There is something that ties them all together. So, and I like to have the bookends. I like to, okay, here it is. And here's what we've come out with, So
yeah,
that's why I did it. And the old saying that truth is stranger than fiction, I think applies.
Absolutely. Yeah, I mean, it's funny because I don't necessarily consider myself a big, believer in such things necessarily, but everybody has these experiences. Everybody has. I mean, not specifically aliens in my case, like this latest book. I'm not a huge alien visitations guy, but ghosts and stuff. I feel like I'm getting closer to that kind of thing as I get a little older. And I mean, I just turned 30 this year, so I'm not that old, but I mean, I still like, the older I get, the more I think in tune with that kind of thing I am.
Well, I hear you. I understand what you're saying. And a lot of people feel the same way. They say, well, maybe I can think, that there are ghosts and I've heard enough about it. But aliens? No, come on. You got to be kidding me. But, think about this. I've come up with this theory that the alien world, the spirit world of which ghosts inhabit, right? And the quantum world, which scientists have told us about with quantum mechanics, are really all the same thing. And to give you an example, ghosts, which people generally accept more than aliens, they can pass through walls, they can disappear, reappear, be half here, half there, kind of, phasing in and phasing out, whatever term you want to use. It's the same thing with aliens. All the alien abduction stories, the same thing. These things can pop in, they can pop out, they phase in, phase out, or vibrate in and out of our reality. They can pass through walls. They actually take people with them through walls, through ceilings. So it sounds an awful lot like what the ghosts are doing, and that's just one example.
So you're positing kind of an extra dimensional, quantum kind of, that actually does make a kind of sense. I mean, it makes logical sense there. Actually, it follows.
Yeah,
because it's. Just, let me go for a second here.
Because
if you had visitors, that's the thing I don't specifically believe in is I specifically don't believe that there are aliens that visit from other planets in our dimension kind of thing. But I'm more open to the idea of a quantum visitor because it makes more sense to me. Like, anybody who's raw power punching their way through outer space to get here, it's kind of weird. I mean, like, I don't know why you'd do that if you're an alien, But if it's like, well, there's like a parallel reality, a quantum alternative universe, then they might be right next door anyway, and that makes more sense to me then.
Yeah, it was Einstein who told us about spooky action at a distance, with quantum, with quantum mechanics. And I had this interesting thing that popped into my mind when I was taking one of my spirit walks, which I've talked to you about before, these meditative walks, because I can't sit still, right? So, and I was shown by, I'll talk about him later, by Anzar, this ancient alien mystic that I have contact with. He showed me a flat piece of paper, and then he showed me a crumpled piece of paper. And I thought, what is he, in my mind's eye, he's showing me this, right? And I'm thinking, what is he showing me this for? And then I thought about it, and I went home and I took a flat piece of, so imagine if you're at home or there at your desk or whatever, a flat piece of paper, 8.5 by 11 sheet of paper, and you write an A in the upper left-hand corner and a B in the bottom right-hand corner. Now crumple it up really tight, Now the A and the B are now touching each other, more than likely, or they're very, very close. Whereas before, when it was a flat piece of paper, they were at the most distant point on the flat sheet of paper. So I think that's what we're talking about, because a lot of people say, well, the thing about aliens, they'd have to travel so far, and there's no way that they could, well, if your travel is, dictated by quantum mechanics, this idea of interdimensional travel, the idea is that it's already collapsed in on itself. It's already touching. And so it doesn't matter whether you're 100 million miles away or light years or 1 mile away, that this spooky action at a distance, how in the microscope or in the below the atomic level, the subatomic particles can interact with each other instantly. Yeah. So that's how I think it's happening. And I'm not a scientist, I'm the first to say that, but I'm very interested in science and I'm very interested in quantum mechanics. And just when I really got into it, I started to see these parallels and these connections. And so I think it does kind of help people kind of maybe at least accept the possibility that it might have something to do with that. And that's, that's kind of where I'm at right now. But I understand skepticism too, because I'm skeptical, even though I've had all these weird experiences my whole life. When somebody presents me with something I've never heard of before, I have I don't know, that doesn't sound right. So I have to I'll go through all the rationalizations, say, well, maybe it was this, maybe it was that. And finally I end up with, wait a second, I think it really was something. And then this, one of my spirit guides, my friend Gene, who we talked about, who passed away 4 years ago, he told me, why is it so hard for you to believe one more extraordinary thing when you already believe in all these other extraordinary things? And I said, it's just human nature. I think we are a little bit skeptical, even those that have had all these experiences. So I think it's a very healthy, natural reaction to have that.
Yeah, and I agree. I also think there's something to it, especially I've definitely heard, this was a few years ago on his podcast, The Secrets, Michael Stackpole. He's an author of fantasy and science fiction. I guess he wrote some Star Wars novels and things like that too. But he explained, and this is a podcast about writing, by the way, The Secrets. But he explained that there's this thing about how writing isn't a survival trait. And I think it's similar. The ability to write a novel, it doesn't help you survive in the wilderness. So we're kind of evolved to go away from it because it requires a lot of focus.
Right.
And so it's harder. That's why it's hard to write like a long piece of work, because you don't feel like you're surviving. You're not getting really physical rewards in the sense of your biology, your endorphin rush isn't happening most of the time unless you've trained yourself to like it, kind of thing. So anyway, point is, it's similar. I think it's similar with belief in spiritual or supernatural elements. I mean, that's not exactly a survival trait because it doesn't help your physical body necessarily, but it does. It just is not an obvious approach, right?
Right.
Yeah.
Well,
anyway.
Yeah, no, I understand what you're saying. And the, I think we talked about this before, but one thing that your listeners might think about is this idea of, it's an experiment we do actually in the paranormal class I teach. And that's the idea of being stared at, the feeling of being stared at. And we do an experiment in class. We turn our backs to each other, and then we try to guess, is that, or feel it, is the person, or not, you turn your back, one person turns their back, the other's either looking at them or not looking at them, but the person who's turned their back doesn't know that. And they try to guess in intervals. And most of the time, people can figure out somebody's staring at them. And where does that come from? There's no physical explanation. It's like, wait a second, I don't have eyes in the back of my head. I don't have a spidey sense or whatever, or some kind of special feelers. So what is it? And the idea is that this could be a survival mechanism that we have had, but we don't really, use it as much as we used to when we lived in caves and were being chased by whatever, God knows what kind of creature was chasing us, saber-toothed. I don't even know if they existed at the same time.
Oh, I think there were saber-toothed tigers at the same time as humans.
Yeah, well, at least there were cave bears. I know that.
Yeah, bears for sure.
And that was bad because they've shown that that's part of the reason we don't like at least the scientist is that I read this article by, that the idea of the nails on the chalkboard, like in the Jaws movie, Captain Quinn or whatever. And that is a thing that's built into us from when we lived in caves, the sound of bear claws on bare rock, this idea that, oh my God, it just gives you shivers and you can't stand it, so that's a survival mechanism. It's very much built into our DNA, I think.
Yeah, and even babies are afraid of snakes. They don't need to be taught to know that.
Yeah, that's
that kind of thing. Yeah,
very bad. Snakes bad.
and actually, parallel to that, all cats will hiss like snakes, even if they've never met a snake. A cat will pretend to be a snake when it's angry. It's that kind of thing too. So this goes across species as well. Obviously,
it's a very scary sound.
Yeah, not a good one unless you're. Maybe unless you're another snake. Maybe they like it. I don't know. But I'm imagining even other snakes don't hiss at each other. They don't go around hissing at each other if they're not already pissed off. I don't know.
Yeah, I wonder if that's part of their mating ritual.
I don't know a lot about snakes, so
I wouldn't. I'm not a snake person. I know some people are. They like snakes as pets, but I prefer to have. We don't have any pets, but I prefer to have pets that can't kill me. That's always good.
Oh, that becomes a pretty limited number in some cases.
I know.
You're stuck with little dogs and maybe a cat or two.
Gerbil, maybe.
Yeah, gerbil. I suppose rats aren't likely to kill you, are they? Like mice.
I don't know. Who knows?
Anyway, I write fantasy. I'm all about that kind of thing. Like, yeah. How scary could it be? And then, how scary could this thing become? Is the other thing.
Exactly.
But when you say your writing you mentioned your writing process and why it makes sense that you have the prologue, and to get back to that a little bit, how do you approach actually writing these longer nonfiction books? What kind of do you do an outline, that kind of thing? The stories, these things have happened to me, and I've taken some notes and journaling throughout the years, and some stuff is just memories that I put together. And actually, in this book, there's also a combination of my conscious memories. I've reached out to in fact, in one of these alien stories, I reached out to a friend of mine who was there at the time during this incident, and also retrieved memories from hypnotic regression. So a combination. This one story in particular, there was those three things together. So that makes it a very interesting combination of sources to put together the pieces, and we really just have a few puzzle pieces, all of us, trying to figure this stuff out. Yeah. But it lends itself to my, because I'm a historian, so it's chronological, and I'm a nonfiction is my thing, so it just lends itself to that type of writing. So there's always research too, because I don't just say, okay, this happened in Eastern Washington. I say, okay, now in Eastern Washington, this particular location is also known as Manistash Ridge. And here's the other things that have happened there. So I give a little local folklore, and, it's almost like, kind of like a travel guide. One of my friends said he was reading the book and he had to pull out, he was researching all the locations where I was and mapping it out. So I thought that was kind of interesting. So it's kind of a travel log, a paranormal travel log memoir type thing, and it just lends itself to nonfiction, and of course there's a moral to every story. I think that's the way I kind of think when I think about what has happened to me. I think there's a reason why this happened, and here's what I've learned from it, and I've progressed a little bit more, got another piece of the puzzle, and then I write about the next thing that's happened. So it's nice to have a bookends on that, which kind of tie it together. So it's not just really episodic. It really kind of ties the whole piece together, and I think provides readers with kind of my insights. Although I provide insights for each episode, and each thing that had happened, but kind of from the 10,000 foot level, I kind of give a better overview at the beginning, and then what lessons have we learned at the end? Where do we go from here? Kind of a thing. So that's my process for writing these. It just seems like a natural process. And even the plays that I've written, they're historical plays. Mm-hmm. So I use, things that have actually happened, and then
there's certain, I have to create certain dialogue, obviously not everything, but that fits into those characters. And sometimes I have to use composite characters, which is a fiction thing that I think people do. A lot of fiction writers, even though they put at the beginning of their books, nobody, this was not any person in real life, or whatever the standard disclaimer is, But yeah, I think it probably was a real person, and you're just using a composite or a different name or a different location or something. And that's cool because you write what you know. So there
absolutely.
you go.
Absolutely. Yeah. Especially with composite characters, I think it makes sense. I mean, sometimes those are more than one person kind of rolled into one, and then that's kind of, But,
and like you take, like Platoon, the movie Platoon, it's a great, obviously Academy Award winning movie from the 80s, Oliver Stone, but no one person went through all of those experiences that his main character by Charlie Sheen went through. And even Oliver Stone himself was in the Vietnam War, but in order to make a really good movie in 3 acts and fit it into the, Hollywood, the way it has to be packaged, he had to condense it and put all those things into one person. Mm-hmm. So, you take whatever license you need to, although it is based on real situations. So that's kind of what I had to do with playwriting, is that I couldn't go blow by blow in my typical nonfiction style. In fact, I had a mentor, a playwriting couple of mentors who said, no, that's not going to work. An audience is not going to sit there while you painstakingly go through all the details of what happened now, what happened next, and that kind of stuff. So that you have to adapt. And it was a steep learning curve though with playwriting. It's a whole other thing. And I haven't been able to adapt to screenwriting for some reason. I've tried to write a screenplay and it just doesn't. I just don't seem to. Maybe if I really worked at it, took a lot of classes, got a mentor or something, I could. But then there's the motivation. Do I really want to do that? I really wanted to do plays. I really wanted to write these nonfiction books and my history books. And I've written one novel. It was for children or for middle school readers, but it was based on real characters and real things that have happened. And then I just kind of created a scenario behind it. So anyway, that's kind of my process for all this stuff.
No, that makes sense. So most of your work is kind of has this autobiographical element or historical element to it then.
Yes. Yeah, and it fits in nicely with how I approach history, that history is a very personal thing. Like the first day of class, I tell the students, okay, when America goes to war, does America really go to war? And the answer is no. Individual Americans go to war. We're the ones who make history. And the textbook I wrote for my history class is called Making History. It's what we do, each one of us, every single day. You do, I do, all the 320 other million Americans do every day, and create what we call history.
Oh, fascinating. That is amazing. Fascinating.
Individual approach.
Yeah, that is a very interesting approach, and and it goes very well with the kind of narrative approach that it sounds like you take with the Timeless Trilogy. Yeah,
and I think there's it lends it a lot of authenticity. I'm brutally honest, especially in this latest book. I could see where somebody could read the book and I would come across as maybe, well, obviously a flawed human being, but then aren't we all? I think somebody said that. This is a great story of a flawed human being. And yes, guilty as charged, but I've learned something from each one of those experiences, and my intentions are good. And obviously, when you write, you want people to read it. You want people to buy your book or your ebook or the audiobook. In this case, I actually am having an audiobook come out in a couple weeks, which I hadn't done with the other two. And there's a reason why I hadn't done it, because I knew, well, partly it's not cheap to record properly, to have Audible accept it. And the other thing, it takes a long time, and and you'd think it would be kind of fun to read your own work. It's like, oh, that's going to be great. I'm just going to sit there and read my own stuff. And man, it gets tiring. And then your voice gives out, and and the guy keeps saying, oh, you got to say that again. You made a mistake. I didn't make a mistake. Yeah, you made a mistake. Okay. And then you have to go back and do it again. And by the time you're done, you're exhausted. I mean, there's a reason why people hire. There's a reason why people hire, people to read these things.
Definitely. I would, if I was making a little more money, I would probably try to set up some audiobook for my novels. But it's so difficult to even make the ebooks hit the black. It's tough with the audiobooks too. And those
you got
cost so much more.
Oh yeah, they do. It could. I've heard range from, somewhere between. You're talking about several $100s, almost $1,000, or up to two grand.
Yeah.
Even if you record it yourself, that's just you getting the recording time to do a standard size book, maybe 250 pages or so. If it's longer, it's going to cost more. And then if you hire somebody to read it, man, you're talking about, I don't know how many, a couple more thousand.
I mean, that's
a big chunk of change.
I've seen the markup. Yeah. Anyway. Yeah, but that's cool. Audiobooks are really big right now, obviously, and I'm not a huge fan of them in particular. I mean, I've listened to a few. I'm not like, I prefer ebooks probably to them, but
yeah.
No, I don't know. Just I like reading. I read pretty fast, so it's okay. But I can understand. It's important for accessibility that audiobooks are out there, and a lot of people prefer them. So that's good that you're getting your work out there in that way.
Long distance truckers. There's a whole market there. Those guys, they listen to late night radio. So every time I'm on Coast to Coast AM, I'm just on the third time recently. They're listening. They're calling in. They're listening to audiobooks. So there is a big market out there. There's a lot of trucks on the road.
Yeah, podcasts too, I'm sure.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
A lot of that stuff going on there.
All that content. Yeah.
Yeah. And there is so much audio content these days. It's crazy.
Oh yeah. It's hard to cut through the hundreds of thousands or a million or whatever it is out there.
Yeah. No kidding. So as far as this latest book, aliens is your focus here, the alien encounters.
Well, it's like I think 9 of the 24 new stories that I write about, a lot of them recent. I mean, I do go back to 1964 and tell a story I hadn't told before, but there are 24 new paranormal stories that weren't in the first 2 books. Okay. And 9 of them have to do with alien contact or abduction. I prefer to call it a reunion because I have this theory that, they are not really strangers to us. Mm-hmm. I think that we all are connected. And actually, I have a friend of mine teaches at Montana Tech, Michael Masters. He's a professor there. He wrote a book called Identified Flying Objects, where his theory is that these are time-traveling humans coming back and trying to help us. They're not really aliens, which is that's a really interesting concept. And there are other people who have theorized that as well. So anyways, I write about 9 of these experiences. And like I said, one of them was a unique way of telling the story in that I combined my own conscious memories with retrieved hypnotic regression, and also conferring with a friend of mine who was on this fateful 1977 road trip that we took. And it came out, it was really weird. I didn't know how this was going to come out, and it came out weird. The thing I want to say about hypnotic regression, because a lot of people think, oh yeah, okay, right, you just make that stuff up. It is a serious thing. And nobody could have been more nervous about it than me to be hypnotized, because I thought, oh yeah, it's a gimmick, or they're going to make you dance around like a chicken and make fun of you and videotape it, put it on YouTube or something. And no, you're in control the whole time. You're just so deeply relaxed that you access these subconscious memories that are there. They're always there. They just bubble up occasionally. We don't even know it sometimes. And so that was revealed. But the really interesting thing is what happens the couple days after the hypnotic regression. It doesn't stop. It keeps flowing. You start dreaming about stuff. You start remembering stuff you hadn't remembered before. And it was at that point that I contacted my friend. I call him Ernie in the book. That's not his real name, but he didn't want his name used.
Sure.
And so I contacted him. I said, and I was I admit, I was a little coy at first. I said, do you remember the trip we took in 1977? And what do you remember about that trip? He said, oh, it was a weird trip. There's some weird stuff. So I said, well, do you remember when you were driving and we were in the wrong lane and we were both asleep? You were asleep at the wheel and I was asleep.
Wow.
We almost died. He said, oh, yeah, I remember that. Yeah, that was scary. And I said, you remember how we pulled off onto this forest road in this wilderness area? And we just parked on the side of a dirt road, and the weird lights, and it was a strange thing. Yeah, I remember all that stuff. So he remembered all that, and he remembered where it was. It was at Black Pine Peak, which is a remote wilderness area in Idaho. And So he remembered all that stuff. And then after we made contact, then I told him, I want to share something with you. Here's what I think happened. And I told him I had this hypnotic regression and my own conscious memories. And I told him, that I think it was alien contact that we had and that he was abducted and that I had contact and he was abducted. And so he listened, we were emailing back and forth. We talked a little bit on the phone. And then all of a sudden he got really hostile. I mean, really hostile. It's like, why didn't you just tell me this right away? I'm agnostic about the paranormal and this stuff, but you should have just told me right away. I feel like you're deceiving me. Why are you doing it? And he was really hostile. And I said, I'm sorry, Ernie. I just, this is the kind of thing you don't just bring up at a cocktail party, oh yeah, how about that alien abduction thing? So I wanted to kind of just see what you remembered. And I shared with you, what I had remembered and what I was going to write about. And then he sent me this really interesting email where he said, well, what if I come out with my own story, but I guess it won't, abduction story, but I guess it won't matter if you print it first, if you publish it first. And then he said, well, I do remember some stuff. And then he said, I remember two aliens talking and I was kind of acting like I was out of it or drugged, or I was out of it or drugged. And they said something about, this one's kind of a squealer. You'd think he hadn't seen pincers before. He used the word pincers, right?
Huh.
Which is kind of a scary word. I don't like that word, pincers. It's all kinds of negative connotations. So anyway, then he said, and you should, because then I told him I felt bad that he was upset, and then he addressed that. He said, well, maybe the real reason you feel bad is because you allowed your best friend to be abducted by aliens and did nothing to stop it.
Wow.
And then I wrote him back and I said, are you kidding, or are you serious, or are you really mad at me? What? He has not spoken to me since. He won't speak to me. He won't email me. And this is, about not going on 9 months, I guess, since. And I send him emails that don't even refer to that. I'll just say, hey, how about the baseball season, or how about the football? Just some innocuous thing. No, he will not answer. And then I asked Yvonne Smith, who does this for a living. She does the hypnotic regressions. She's a well-known, throughout the world, actually doing these things. And she said that's a typical reaction when there's a tandem experience. You'll have one that'll have conscious memories and then get retrieved memories and then try to confer with the other one, and the other one gets hostile and won't talk to them anymore.
Wow.
Happens with families too. There have been family, where one sibling will see something, they'll both see it and experience it, but only one will acknowledge it and the other one gets hostile. And when you think about it, it's a natural reaction. It's like, do I really want to deal with this, or am I just going to, I don't want to talk to this person because it reminds me of something that was very traumatic, obviously. So anyway, so that's one of the stories in there. I call it Mel's Hole because it, anyway, there's a famous place in Eastern Washington called Mel's Hole, and nobody knows if it actually exists. It's supposed to be an alien portal and all kinds of weird things, this bottomless hole or whatever. Because one of our stops before we got to the Black Pine Peak in Idaho was at an overlook on Manistash Ridge, which is the nearest location to where they think Mel's Hole is. So anyway, so that's why I called the story Mel's Hole.
Cool.
So
we're actually running out of time, though.
Oh, I'm sorry. That was too long of a story.
No, that's okay. I'm glad you told the story. That's great.
Okay.
It's been a great episode, actually.
I get carried away.
No, it's okay. It's fine. Makes it easy. Makes my job easy.
Okay.
So, Bruce, tell people where they can find your work and you online.
Okay, the Timeless Trilogy is on Amazon. So just look up Bruce Solheim, Bruce Olav Solheim, if you want. Throw my middle name in there, OLAV. And you can find the Timeless Trilogy there. Like I said, audiobooks or ebooks, print books, and soon the Trinity will be in audiobook too. And then for Snark, those of you that are interested in that, it's all ages comic. It has social commentary, history, it's got a little bit of everything, humor. You can go to Comixology and look that up. Comixology is the leading site for getting digital comics, or you can just go to my website, bruceolavsolheim.com, and you can find everything there.
Awesome. Thanks for being on the show, Bruce.
Thank you, Tim.
It's been
Always a
fun.
pleasure.
Always a pleasure indeed.
Yeah.
The pleasure is mine. So as for this podcast, the pleasure is mine. So as for this podcast, people, you can find more of us at Libsyn, where we're hosted, or at mentalcellarpublications.com. Hopefully soon you'll be able to find us at timniederwriter.com, but I don't think there's anything there yet because I haven't put anything up there. Niederwriter as in the phonetic writer.com. But also, don't forget, you can find my books on Amazon.com. Demon Scroll is out. That's the epic fantasy. Then we got 10 Liars, which is epic steampunk fantasy. And the Forces of Empire Book 1, which is also called Origin of Storms, which is space opera. So check all those books out, and hopefully we'll be seeing some sequels to those this year. Thanks for listening, folks. Have a good one.
That tears it.